So you finally bought yourself some grains because you're wanting to store them. You're wanting to start milling your own wheat, making that healthy bread, and possibly just storing your grains for a long period of time. But the biggest question I get asked the most is, how do you actually store the grains, especially for long term? Specifically, should you be freezing the grains? Do you need to put them in Mylar bags? How do you properly store them so they will not go bad, so you won't get bugs in them, all the things. So stay tuned because we're going to be answering that question today. Hey everyone, welcome back to Grains and Grits. My name is Felicia, and on this channel I unlock the secrets of biblical healthy whole grains by posting videos all about freshly milled wheat, recipes, busting a lot of wheat myths, how to be storing grains, why you should be storing grains, all of those things. So that's something that you like, be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Today we're going to be talking about, as I said, how to properly store your grain. I see a lot of information out there about storing your grains, and a lot of what I see is kind of overkill. It's not necessarily needed to store some of your grains, but we're going to dive into that specifically, what you should be doing. Overall, when it comes to your grains, also things like your beans, any dried grain, rice, corn, wheat berries, beans, you ultimately need a good container with a really good lid, because you always want to make sure that you keep out all moisture and all pests. Because as you know, grains and beans are seeds, and if they get wet, they will start sprouting, and you either need to consume it or you need to plant it, otherwise they're going to go bad. And of course, we don't want pests getting on our grains for obvious reasons. Now, for those who do not know, I've been milling my wheat for about a decade now, and I've definitely been able to store my wheat in various conditions. I've actually had them completely outside before, just underneath a type of lean-to shed, but they were outside. I now have them in a shed. I've stored them in my house. So I've stored them in many different places, and I can definitely speak from experience what to do and what not to do, how to avoid those mistakes from making your grains go bad. Because trust me, I've had that happen before. Learn from my mistakes. Now, before I get into everything, do want to let you know that if you are looking into storing grains, I do have a free grain calculator for you. Description box below. You just sign up for my newsletter, and this is a grain calculator that helps you calculate how much grain that you possibly need to store up for your family for however long that you're wanting to store it up for. So for example, I have a large family, and I generally know how many loaves of bread I consume each month. So I'm able to calculate that to make sure that I have enough grains on hand for, say, 6 months or a year or 2 years. However long you want it, this grain calculator is going to help you figure that out. So be sure to check that out in the description box below. So as you see here, I actually have a wide variety of different things that I do to store my grains. I actually have 2 places that I keep my grains. I usually have them in mason jars right here, or glass jars in my kitchen, that I keep a huge collection of grains in there. But I also keep many of my grains out in my storage shed, which, if you don't know, I live in Florida, where it gets stupid crazy hot here and humid like you wouldn't believe. We deal with like 1,000-degree humidity. And I'm actually to successfully store my grains for long periods of time in my shed that is not insulated. It is no air conditioning of any kind whatsoever. And I store my grains out in this shed. You can also do this in a garage, or if you just have a place that is not temperature controlled or well insulated, you still can store your grains properly, and I'm going to be telling you how to do that. So let's first of all talk about the containers that I recommend to use for storing grains, and then we're going to talk about what you should be freezing, or how to prep your grains for long storage. So first of all, with the containers, there are different options that you do have. Again, ultimately you just need a good container with a good lid that's going to keep pests out. The container that you choose will also depend on how much you are buying. You can buy 5 pounds of grains, you can buy 25 pounds, you can buy 50 pounds. So you do need to keep that in consideration of the size of your container based on what you're buying. And in case you're wondering, I right now get all of my grains from Azure Standard, who I love, and the link for that will be below, so be sure to check out that description box below. I will also link anything here that I mentioned so that you can find it easily as well. So description box below. So to give you a general idea of what can fit into these containers, if you were buying 5 pounds of wheat, that will generally fit into a 1 gallon glass jar. So that's 5 pounds. If you were buying 25 pounds of grains, now this differs based on if you were buying oats, 25 pounds of oats, or 25 pounds of wheat berries, beans, corn, those type of things. Oats are considerably lighter, not the oat groats. This is if you buy like the cut oats or the rolled oats. If you buy a 50-pound bag of the cut oats or the rolled oats, that's a lot. That will fill up about 3 5-gallon buckets. So if you only have a few buckets or you don't need that much, consider buying 25 pounds of oats because it's about the same size bag as a 50-pound bag of wheat. So something to keep in mind. When it comes to wheat and corn, also with beans, generally 50 pounds of wheat will fill up just over a 5-gallon bucket. So actually, I think it would ideally fit into a 6-gallon bucket, but just know if you only have a 5-gallon bucket, it will overflow a little bit from that. So hopefully that helps you out when knowing what containers you need to buy for how much wheat or grains that you are getting. So first of all, with containers, we have the 3-gallon. Let me move this here. So first of all, for containers, we of course have a 3-gallon bucket, which is here. And then we also have the big one here. This is about a 5 or 6 gallon, or this is about a 6-gallon bucket, which you can see is a little bit taller than this one, which is a 5-gallon bucket. Now this blue one here, I pick up at Lowe's, and it does come with a good lid that's easy to get off. So you can buy these at Lowe's or even Home Depot. And you can see that they snap on pretty well, and I've had good success with these at Lowe's. And again, they're easy to come off. Now with this 3-gallon one here, this one has that original lid that came on, which you have to like get one of those special tools, you can see, to lift here. So these are a pain to get on and off all the time. So one thing that I certainly recommend heavily is if you're wanting either easy access to your grains, if you can't handle like this lid or you don't want to mess with it, a wonderful invention are the gamma lids, which I have here. So you can't really see this because it's white. They do come in many different colors. And I found these at hardware stores. Azure Standard carries them. I know Bread Becker's has them. You can find them in different locations. You can get different colors. I do know with Azure, I don't believe you can choose your color. So keep that in mind when ordering from Azure. But as you can see, all you do is it just screws on. And you see how easily it is to get this off. And then you've got your lid. This rim right here just snaps on. And then now you're able to just screw your lid on and off. And the gamma lids will, they seal very well. They will keep moisture out. They will keep pests out. Now I will say one thing I have learned is whenever I recently moved, be careful with your buckets, because when I moved, the rim here, unbeknownst to me, got cracked. And when it got cracked, moisture was able to come in, and I actually had a bit of spoilage, or some of my wheat started sprouting. Thankfully, I was able to catch it in enough time where it wasn't ridiculously bad, but it did get fed to the chickens. So they were happy. I was sad because I couldn't use the grains. So keep that in mind. Just be careful when moving them that you don't crack your gamma lid side, because any cracks will allow moisture in. But the gamma lids are absolutely wonderful. Not all of my buckets have them. I only mainly use them for buckets that I'm accessing a lot. So it's something to keep in mind. If you're just, because these are about $10 each, a lid, which can rack up if you have like 6, 7, 10 buckets of grains. So do know that a lot of times you can just stick with the regular lid that you get with the bucket. Just make sure that it's sealed well. But if you're accessing it a lot, the gamma lids are the way to go. So again, you have your 5-gallon bucket, your 6-gallon bucket, and then of course your little 3-gallon bucket that I have down there. And then of course you have your glass containers, which we have the lovely 1/2-gallon mason jar, the gallon size mason jar, and then we have the little gallon size that's a bit squat like this. You can also get them this shape in the 1/2-gallon as well. Just depends on what you want. Azure Standard has a pretty good selection of these along with the lids. Do know that the containers and the lids are sold separately, so keep that in mind if you do order. And I generally love to keep my beans in my 1/2-gallon jars. I actually have them displayed in my kitchen and they look so pretty. So let me know below if you like the look of grains and beans in mason jars, because I think they look beautiful. So these are all the different containers that you get. Generally, if I'm buying 5 pounds of a grain, I store them in just the glass jars. I don't even bother putting them in my buckets. It's not large enough. My buckets are reserved for the 25 and the 50-pound bags of grains. Okay, so now the big question, to freeze or not to freeze your grains. And I'm literally asked this all the time. Now I get to have a nice little video to send to people as my answer. Many people actually state that you need to freeze your wheat berries before storing. And that is actually not true. Wheat berries do not need to be frozen before storing. So long as they are kept dry and free from pests, they're going to store very well. Remember the story of Joseph in the Bible, and I've talked about that before on why you should be storing whole grains. I mentioned the story of Joseph, and they were able to store grains for 7 years. Actually, longer than that, because it was 7 years of plenty they stored up, and then 7 years of famine. And you know that they didn't have freezers back in ancient Egypt. And we've also found grains, wheat berries in ancient Egyptian tombs, and they were perfectly fine and they were never frozen. So your wheat berries, you actually do not have to freeze. I caution you about freezing them because wheat berries, if they do get wet, you know, that they will sprout and they will spoil. So I never freeze my wheat berries, and I've never had a problem. And I have stored wheat berries for long term, and by long term, you know, I have had them for over a year, some 3 to 6 months. And again, this is Florida, hot and humid, and everything like that. So that has been tested. So wheat berries, you do not have to freeze. Now you do have to freeze any rice and any corn, and that means whole corn, grits. If you buy those, you do need to freeze them for at least 24 to 48 hours before storing them in your buckets, in your containers. And this is so important, because what happens if you don't do that is those little teeny tiny little weevil bugs will start hatching and consume your grains, and you will open up a bucket one day of your corn, for example, and see all these black little dots all over your corn. Not that I have done that at all. Ugh. Yeah, that was horrible. That was horrible. So again, what I do, I actually have deep freezers. Work with what you have. If you need to, if you don't have deep freezers to put like a 25 or 50-pound bag of grain in, of the corn or the rice, then just dump it into, say, gallon size or quart size bags, freeze it for 24 to 48 hours, store it. You can do that in batches. It's going to be okay. Now, if I know that I'm going to be consuming, say if I buy like a 2-pound bag of rice, I know I'm going to consume that quickly. I don't bother freezing it. This is for longer term storage. If you plan on storing, I would say at least a month or more of any corn or rice products, freeze it 24 to 48 hours and then put them in your buckets. And that's going to kill all those little bugs. I know that sounds disgusting, but that's nature. And that will help you out. As far as beans go, I have never frozen my beans. I have stored them for forever. I literally have a half-gallon mason jar of split peas that I've had for forever, and no bugs are hatching out of that at all. So beans, I never bother freezing or anything like that. Of course, feel free to be better safe than sorry. If you want to go the extra mile, you can put things like oxygen absorbers into your buckets. I'll link some below for you guys. The oxygen absorbers, the point of that is that, well, like as they say, they take all the oxygen out of your container. So if there are any bugs in there, they're not going to be able to survive. For Mylar bags, the purpose for Mylar bags is to actually keep your food fresh, which you don't need to do for rice, corn, wheat berries, and beans. Their seeds, I would use Mylar bags for things like coffee beans, things that are just going to lose that flavor over time. So definitely coffee beans would be something to go into Mylar bags, but not needed for your whole grains. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. Again, I have had extensive experience storing grains in various environments. And this is the beauty of grains, is the fact that you don't have to store them in a temperature controlled environment. So long as you have a good container and a really good lid, you can store them in your garage, your shed, wherever you need them to store them, even outside. Cover them just for that extra protection against the rain. But that's the beauty of grains and why it makes bags for the ultimate prepper food that everyone needs to have. I hope this answers your questions. If you have any more questions for me about storing grains or anything like that, comment below. I love answering your questions. I love interacting with y'all in the comments. Also, be sure to get that grain calculator if you haven't already. And I also have my little recipe cheat sheet with my most used recipes, a little cheat sheet I have that's easy to reference. You can hang it up in your kitchen. So that's also down in the description box below, along with all the things that I have listed. Again, I hope that this really helps you guys out. And as always, I will see you next week. Bye.